The December holidays seem to inspire a lot of reflection about the passing of time. Not only do they happen to fall at the end of another year, but they tend to contain a lot of memories for the people who celebrate. December is a time when family and friends are more often together and when life's milestones are more apparent. Tonight, we'll follow a family through generations, through prosperity, through lean years, through ordinary days that didn't seem important at the time, and through extraordinary moments that changed everything. We'll do it from a single vantage point, a faithful old grandfather clock in the front hall of a house that stays standing as the world transforms around it. The clock will do what clocks do, steadily, patiently, without judgment. It will count the minutes of laughter and the minutes of worry the same way. It will watch children become parents and parents become grandparents. It will see fashions and music and technology come and go like weather. And as it keeps time, it will witness something even more enduring than time itself. The way love can travel through a home and settle into the corners like warmth. Before we begin, it's time to get nice and cozy. If you haven't already, you can switch off your lights, place your phone face down, and let any physical distractions drift out of reach. Make yourself comfortable. Let your shoulders soften. Allow your jaw to unclench. If you feel any tightness in your body, you don't need to wrestle with it. Just notice it and then invite it to loosen, the way you'd loosen a knot in a ribbon. As you sink deeper into the support of your bed, let your pillow cradle your head. Let your breath slow down into something easy and natural. No force, no effort, just air moving in and out, in and out. The end of the year arrives like a soft bell at the edge of a long hallway, reminding us that another chapter is closing, even as we're still living inside it. The holidays gather memories the way snow gathers on a windowsill, layer by layer, quietly, until we look up and realize how much has accumulated. It's easy to look at the larger picture and feel overwhelmed by the noise, by the sharp edges, by the times when the world seems unjust or unkind. But even then, we still hold a quiet power, the ability to be a soft place in a hard day, the ability to be patient, the ability to be considerate, the ability to be the person who makes things feel a little safer. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. So if you felt tired or stretched thin, let this be a gentle reminder. Even your small kindness matters. Even the soft light you carry matters. You're a piece of the great puzzle of life, and the warmth you offer, sometimes without even realizing it, makes the whole picture better. Now, if you're ready, we'll walk through the front door of a newly built house for a cozy, festive story. The year is 1892, somewhere in the United States, in a town that is growing quickly. New streets, new shops, new faces, and the faint smell of fresh-cut lumber lingering in the air. It's late autumn, and the trees are nearly bare, their last leaves spinning down like slow copper coins. On one of the town's newest streets stands a home that looks as if it has been dreamed into existence by someone who wanted beauty to feel solid, something you could touch, something you could live inside. It has a steep roofline, a wide porch that wraps around the front, and a tall front window that catches the afternoon light. There is even a small turret, which makes the house feel just a little bit like a storybook. The house belongs to the Harrow family, Samuel Harrow and his wife, Eliza. They came from modest beginnings, the kind of beginnings that teach you to mend what you have, to appreciate what you earn, and to imagine a better future without taking it for granted. Samuel worked for years in carpentry and contracting, saving what he could, taking on extra jobs, always with a plan quietly taking shape in his mind. When the last bit of paint dried and the final nail was set, Samuel did one more thing before calling the house complete. He brought in a grandfather clock. It arrived wrapped and padded like a precious instrument. The delivery men carried it carefully into the front hall, and Samuel supervised with the intensity of someone guiding a fragile ship into harbor. The clock's body was made of dark oak, polished until it shone softly. Its face was simple and dignified, with slender hands and numbers that looked as though they had always belonged there. The glass panel revealed a brass pendulum that would soon swing with steady confidence. Eliza stood beside Samuel, her hands clasped at her waist, her expression tender. "It feels like a gatekeeper," she said quietly, as if she didn't want the clock to hear her and become vain. Samuel smiled. "Then it's the right thing," he replied. "A house needs a heartbeat." That first evening, after the men left and the hall grew quiet, Samuel wound the clock carefully. The key turned with small clicks. The pendulum was set in motion with a gentle push, and the new house received its first steady rhythm. Tick, tick, tick. The sound was calm, purposeful, reassuring. It wasn't loud, but it filled the spaces between things. It moved through the halls like a soft thread stitching the home together. From that moment on, wherever a person was in the house, they could feel time passing in a way that seemed almost friendly. The Harrows had 2 children, Mabel, who was 12, and already beginning to carry herself with the seriousness of someone practicing adulthood, and Peter, who was 8, and seemed to have a spring in his feet that made stillness nearly impossible. To them, the new house was not just a house. It was a castle. It was a ship. It was a stage. It was a world. They played hide and seek in the upstairs rooms, sliding behind half-open doors, pressing themselves into the shadows of closets, giggling into their sleeves. They ran along the hallway outside their bedrooms, their socks whispering over the wooden floorboards, until Eliza called up the stairs, reminding them that the house was new and still deserved a little reverence. But most of life happened on the main floor, and the grandfather clock held a front-row seat to all of it. Everyone who entered removed their coat in front of the clock. Packages were handed off there. Umbrellas were shaken out there. Quick greetings were exchanged there, and lingering goodbyes too. The clock watched the everyday rituals that made a house feel lived in. A hat placed carefully on a hook, a scarf draped over a banister, a basket of apples carried in from the market. And then, as December approached, the house prepared for its first Christmas. In those days, the idea of a Christmas tree inside the home was becoming more popular, especially among families who wanted to show they were keeping up with the times. Eliza, who loved tradition but also loved a little bit of show, insisted that they have one. "If we are going to build a beautiful house," she said, "we might as well let it be beautiful in December too." Samuel agreed, though he pretended to grumble for the sake of the children's amusement. A pine tree was brought in, tall and fragrant, its needles sharp and lively. Eliza placed it in the parlor near the large front window, so that the neighborhood could see it glowing from the street. "Let it be a little gift to anyone who passes by," she said, as she adjusted the branches. They decorated the tree with care. Samuel had ordered glass ornaments from a catalog, delicate baubles that caught the lamplight and turned it into tiny moons. Eliza strung popcorn and cranberries, her fingers moving steadily as she made the garlands. Mabel and Peter were allowed to make their own ornaments too. Paper chains and folded stars and little figures cut out of cardboard. Mabel took her task seriously, carefully trimming each paper edge. Peter, meanwhile, created something that looked like a lopsided bird, then insisted it was a rare Christmas dove. Eliza smiled and placed it on a branch where it could still be admired. The children begged for candles to be placed on the tree, as they had heard some families did. But Samuel refused immediately. "I did not build this house," he said firmly, "so that we can set it on fire for fun." To make up for the lack of candles, Eliza placed extra lanterns around the parlor. Their warm glow made the room feel snug and safe, and the clock in the hall listened approvingly as laughter drifted through the pocket doors. On Christmas Day, the front hall became a fluttering place. Visitors arrived in heavy coats, cheeks pink from the cold. They carried wrapped parcels, baskets of fruit, tins of sweets, and bright Christmas cards that were fashionable at the time, small works of art printed with snowy scenes and gilded edges. The clock watched each guest step in, stamping snow from their boots, looking up to admire the hall and the parlor beyond. It heard compliments offered in polite tones. It heard Eliza's delighted laughter. It heard Peter's excited whispers as he tried to peek at packages before anyone was looking. There was a meal in the dining room: roasted meat, warm bread, butter softening near the hearth, bowls of vegetables seasoned with care. There were songs in the parlor later, sung gently and not always in tune. There was even a moment when carolers arrived at the front door, their voices rising into the cold night like breath made musical. Through it all, the clock took its job seriously. It chimed the hour with steady pride. It counted down the minutes of the evening as children grew sleepy and adults grew softer in their voices. Finally, when only the closest family remained, Mabel and Peter fell asleep on the lower stairs, their bodies folded in the trusting way of children who know they are safe. Samuel carried them one by one to bed, careful not to wake them fully. Eliza stood in the hall, watching, her expression tender, her hand resting briefly on the clock's wooden frame as if to thank it for keeping watch. And then all was quiet, and a new day began. The years continued to pass, and the clock continued to tick, 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 tick. It watched Mabel grow into a young woman with thoughtful eyes. It watched Peter grow tall, his springy energy turning into a restless ambition. It heard conversations about school and work, about the town changing, about new inventions and new possibilities. Some years were easy, filled with prosperity. Some years were leaner, filled with quiet worry and careful budgeting. But each year, December returned, and the house filled itself with familiar rituals. 20 years after that first Christmas, the Harrow house was still standing proudly on its street, though the neighborhood around it had changed. The trees planted when the house was new were taller now, their branches reaching over the sidewalk. The paint on the porch railings had been refreshed more than once. The parlor wallpaper had been replaced with something slightly less ornate, a subtle sign that taste was shifting. Samuel and Eliza were older now. They moved more slowly. Samuel's hair had gone mostly silver, and Eliza's hands had grown more delicate, her knuckles more pronounced. They spent more time in comfortable chairs, reading and writing letters, and watching the world from the porch. But the house was not quiet. Mabel had married a man named Arthur Lane, and they had moved back into the Harrow house with their own children. Samuel and Eliza insisted on it, delighted by the idea of the house staying in the family. "Let it be passed down," Eliza said. "Let it be a place where the years can gather." Mabel and Arthur had 3 children: Rose, who was 11 and had a careful, observant nature; Thomas, who was 9 and always asking questions; and little Edith, who was 5 and had curls that bounced like small springs when she ran. Christmas that year felt both familiar and new. The tree still stood in the parlor window, but now it was lit by a marvelous modern invention: electric lights. They twinkled gently, making the ornaments shine without the danger of flame. Mabel loved the effect. She confessed to Arthur that it was a little indulgent, but the way the lights glittered made her feel as if the house itself was celebrating. The clock listened to the excitement in the hall as relatives arrived. Peter, now a grown man, came home from his travels. He had spent years moving from place to place, drawn by work and adventure, the kind of person who seemed to carry the world in his pockets. He arrived with stories, with gifts, with snow on his shoulders, and the children ran to him as if he were a returning hero. He had brought with him a small carved ornament from another country, something delicate and strange. Eliza held it carefully and laughed in surprise. "We never could have imagined," she said softly, as if she were speaking not only to Peter, but to time itself. The Christmas meal was lively. The parlor rang with conversation. The children played on the rug and peeked into corners of the house that felt mysterious to them, just as it had once felt mysterious to Mabel and Peter. Outside the window, snow fell heavily that year, making the world look softened, as if the town had been wrapped in cotton. Inside, the hearth glowed. The clock chimed the hours, steady and calm, and if it had been able to feel anything like pride, it might have felt it then, because its steady ticking had become the background music of a family's life. Time marched on, as it always did. Tick, tick, tick. Then came years that felt more complicated. The house witnessed the quiet ripple of history as it reached even into the calm of family life. There were conversations in hushed voices. There were newspapers held in trembling hands. There were moments of stillness when it seemed as if the world outside had tilted. When the Great War arrived in the late 1910s, the mood of Christmas changed. The men of the family left home. Peter went first, then Arthur. The house felt strange without them, as if certain sounds had been removed from its music. Mabel stayed, steady as a pillar. She kept the home running. She comforted Samuel and Eliza, who were old enough now that their worry looked almost fragile. Rose, Thomas, and Edith grew quieter, sensing the weight in the adults' voices. Christmas during those years was smaller. The tree still went up, but the decorations were fewer. There were fewer gifts. There were fewer visitors. The parlor felt more subdued, not because the family wanted to dampen joy, but because joy felt like something that had to be handled gently, like a candle in wind. The clock watched Mabel sit near the hearth, reading letters aloud. It watched Eliza press her fingertips to her mouth, as if holding in emotion. It listened to the children ask when their father would come home, and to Mabel's calm voice answering with quiet hope. Through it all, the clock kept time, impartial and steady. Tick, tick, tick. And eventually, the war years passed, and life began to expand again. When the 1920s arrived, the family returned to the house with a burst of energy that felt almost like relief made visible. Arthur came home. Peter came home too. The children, now older, ran through the hallways with different voices, less squeaky, more confident. Rose, now a young woman, had taken a job in town. Thomas had become tall and broad-shouldered, the beginnings of adulthood settling onto him like a coat. Edith had a quick laugh and a fondness for music. And music, indeed, arrived in the parlor in a new form. One day, a Victrola was carried into the room, large, polished, and exciting. When the needle touched a record, sound filled the parlor in a way that seemed almost magical. The younger people pushed back the rug and danced, laughing as they tried to mimic the lively rhythms. The older ones watched with amusement, pleased to see happiness returning. The parlor changed too. Some heavy furniture was moved out, replaced by lighter pieces. The wallpaper was painted over in a softer shade, brightening the room. The clock standing in the hall watched these changes with quiet acceptance. After all, houses, like families, needed to breathe. Christmas in those years was a mixture of thrift and joy. Some gifts were handmade, some were simple. But the laughter was rich, and the closeness of the family felt like a treasure. The years continued, and the children grew into adults, and adults grew into elders. Samuel and Eliza eventually passed into memory, their presence lingering in small ways. A favorite chair, a certain ornament that always went on the tree, a pattern of speech that showed up in their grandchildren's voices. The house held them gently, the way a home can hold the echo of a person long after they are gone. Mabel became the eldest, then Rose, then Thomas, then Edith. The Harrow house stayed in the family as if it had been woven into their identity. Even when family members moved away, they returned for Christmas whenever they could. The front hall continued to buzz each December with arrivals, coats, parcels, greetings. The clock continued to watch. Tick, tick, tick. Then came lean years. There were times when money was scarce, when conversation was careful, when the Christmas meal was smaller. Some pieces of furniture disappeared, sold quietly, without drama, to keep the house running. Decorations were reused year after year. Ornaments that once would have been replaced were repaired instead. But even then, the family found ways to keep Christmas warm. They told stories, they played games, they read aloud, they made hot cocoa and popcorn. They laughed at small things, and those small things became large in the way they mattered. A radio arrived in the parlor during one of those stretches, big and boxy, with a warm glow. It became a new hearth of sorts. The family clustered around it in the evenings, listening to voices and music traveling through the air like invisible ribbons. For the clock, the radio was a strange wonder, another kind of timekeeper, perhaps, marking nights with programs and news and songs. By Christmas of 1942, the house held a different kind of tension again. Another war had arrived. Young men left, some returned changed. The house did not always know what to do with the quiet sorrow that sometimes moved through it like a draft. But it held everyone anyway. It stayed standing. It stayed open. It stayed home. During those wartime Christmases, the tree still stood in the window. The lights still blinked softly. The family still gathered, sometimes in smaller groups, sometimes with a careful attempt at cheerfulness. They wrote letters. They folded up newspapers. They listened to the radio. They watched the clock, perhaps without realizing it, as if the clock's steady rhythm could reassure them that time was still moving forward, and that forward meant, eventually, better. Tick, tick, tick. After the war, the house grew loud again. Babies arrived. Children filled the hall. Toys rolled across the floor. Laughter bounced against the walls. Rose's son, Daniel, brought his own family to the house. Edith, who had married and moved away, returned with her children too. The Harrow house welcomed them all the way it always had, by simply being there, sturdy and familiar, with its front hall and its parlor and its faithful clock. Christmas of 1965 arrived with a look that would have seemed bewildering to Samuel and Eliza. The parlor had changed. The furniture was lower to the ground, cleaner in shape. A bold carpet covered the hardwood floor. The heavy drapes were replaced with lighter curtains. The picture rail was mostly empty now, and instead a single piece of modern artwork hung above the mantel, abstract shapes that looked like a puzzle. And there was a television. It sat like a shiny window in the parlor, glowing with moving images. Children gathered around it, lying on their stomachs on the carpet, their feet kicking idly behind them. Adults watched too, sometimes with fascination, sometimes with skepticism. The clock in the hall could not understand the television, but it could understand what it did. It gathered people together. It created shared moments. It made certain evenings feel special. The Christmas tree that year was bright with multicolored lights. Some of the lights had bubbling liquid inside, as if each bulb contained its own tiny weather. The children squealed with delight. Stockings hung from the mantel, more stockings than the clock could easily count, because the family had grown large. And Santa appeared, as Santa often did in lively houses, not as a mystery, but as a tradition performed with love. A man in a suit with a booming laugh arrived at the door, handing gifts to children who alternated between wonder and suspicion. The littlest ones cried. The older ones stared hard, trying to solve the puzzle. The adults laughed until their eyes watered. After Santa left, the clock noticed something, because the clock noticed everything. The back door opened quietly later, and the same Santa suit slipped up the stairs, moving carefully so as not to be seen. Only the clock saw. A few years after that, the grandfather clock began to falter. It had been wound less carefully. It had been maintained less often. Its steady rhythm grew inconsistent. Its chimes, once perfectly punctual, sometimes drifted a little. The pendulum still swung, but it seemed to do so with a tired sigh. The clock did not feel sorry for itself, not exactly. But it did feel unfinished, as if it still wanted to do its job well. And during that era, the house witnessed something that would have surprised Samuel and Eliza. Older family members moved away. For the first time, people talked about downsizing, about warmer places, about smaller homes that were easier to manage. The Harrow house, once the final dream, became, briefly, too big. But the house stayed in the family because a younger generation stayed behind. A woman named Claire Harrow, Daniel's daughter, returned after college and moved into the house with her husband Thomas. Their daughter, Lily, grew up in the same hallways where Mabel once ran, where Rose once stood listening to the clock, where Edith once danced to jazz music. Lily was quiet and imaginative. She loved the house, but she loved it in a modern way, curling up in corners with books, drawing pictures on the floor, watching television with her aunt on rainy afternoons. Sometimes she sat in the front hall with a toy spread out beside her, and the silent grandfather clock loomed above, dusty and still. The house entered a calmer period then. Fewer big gatherings, softer Christmases, quiet laughter instead of roaring parties. And then, as the Christmas of 1984 approached, something wonderful happened. Claire decided to bring the parlor back to life, not by forcing it to look like the past, but by helping it feel like itself again. The wall-to-wall carpet was removed, revealing the hardwood floors beneath, scuffed but beautiful, like something that had been waiting to breathe. The fireplace, unused for years, was repaired. A technician came to clean the chimney, and when the first fire was lit again, the room seemed to exhale. Claire chose earth tones and soft fabrics. She brought back a few framed pictures, hung lightly along the picture rail. She placed a small basket of blankets near the hearth. The parlor didn't become Victorian again, and it didn't become modern in a harsh way either. It became comfortable, timeless in the way that comfort can be. And then she did the most important thing. She called a clockmaker. The clockmaker arrived in a neat coat, carrying tools that looked as though they had been handed down too. He opened the clock carefully, as if greeting an old friend. He cleaned the gears. He oiled the mechanisms. He adjusted the pendulum. He wound it with confident hands. When he stepped back, the grandfather clock began to tick again. Tick, tick, tick. The sound returned to the hall like a familiar voice. Lily stood beside her mother and listened. "It's like the house is breathing," she whispered. Claire smiled and brushed Lily's hair back gently. "Maybe it is," she said. That Christmas, the family gathered in a way that made the house feel full again. Grandparents returned, carrying bags of gifts. Cousins arrived. Uncles and aunts filled the hall with chatter. The tree in the parlor window glittered wildly, overloaded with ornaments as if everyone had decided that more was better, simply because it felt joyful. Children draped tinsel everywhere. They argued about where the star should go. They insisted on playing holiday cartoons on television, while adults pretended to be annoyed but secretly enjoyed the sound of it. Popcorn filled bowls. Cocoa steamed in mugs. Someone found an old record and played it, and someone else laughed at how scratchy it sounded. On Christmas Eve, everyone wore flannel pajamas and opened one gift each. Lily received a small electronic gadget that made beeping sounds and fascinated her completely. Somewhere down the hall, a remote-controlled car zipped through the front hall and nearly bumped the base of the grandfather clock. The clock, newly restored, did not mind. It simply ticked on, patient and steady. On Christmas Day, the clock felt, if a clock can be said to feel, that everything was in balance. 3 generations were there, gathered in a house that had already held so many Decembers. The parlor, changed by time, was still filled with love. The front hall, bustling as always, still welcomed arrivals the way it always had. The clock chimed exactly on the hour, its voice resonant and sure, and as it watched the family move through the day, laughing, eating, hugging, dozing, it held a quiet faith that the next 100 years of Christmases would bring more good things too. Because that is what houses do when they are cared for. That is what families do when they choose kindness. That is what time does when it keeps moving forward. It carries us through the tough years, and it carries us through the good years, and it offers us again and again the chance to be gentle with one another. Tick, tick, tick. And as you listen to that steady rhythm in your mind, you can let your own thoughts slow down. You can let your body soften a little more. You can let the day fall away behind you like a coat placed on a hook in a warm front hall. You don't have to hold anything up right now. You are safe to rest, and you can drift gently into sleep.
Gentle breezes hum a song, telling me where I belong. In the stillness soft and true, every dream returns to you. Dreaming in the autumn night, everything just feels so right. Hold me close, don't let me go. Love will always gently play. the silence, soft and small, hear my heart, it tells it all. Let the world toss and turn. Let the midnight lanterns burn. I've got no fear, I've got no fear, as long as you're near. Let the wind change the night. Let the moon hide behind the as long as you're near. I don't need return. I don't need fame. Just your smile when you whisper my name. When night is shine with stars and tears, as long as you're near. If the stars all fade away, if the songs forget to play, I'll still have love with you here, as long as you're near. I'll get by you and me, as long as you're autumn breeze, you softly call my name. Every star above shines just the same through the golden leaves, drifting far away. Love is in the air at the close of day. dreams come drifting through the night. No need to speak, no need to cry. Just close your eyes. Sweet lullaby. I've sung this song 100 ways, but none as soft as summer haze. And now I sing it just for you, to send you off with skies of blue. I hum this tune till you're asleep, and guard the dreams you softly keep, till morning paints the waiting sky. Close your eyes, sweet lullaby. Sweet lullaby. Golden leaves begin to fall, drifting through the air. Every moment takes me back to the love we shared. In the glow of autumn skies, holding hands so tight, every whispered dream felt so pure, so right. In the quiet evening breeze, your laughter fills the night. Memories of youthful hearts shining warm and bright. Though the seasons come and go, I still hear your song. Love that bloomed in autumn stays forever strong. Autumn's first love, sweet and true. Every day I dream of you. Through the years, the stars above keep me close to autumn's love. By the river's gentle flow, silver skies would dream. We would talk of endless days lost in tender dreams. above keep me close to autumn's love. When the autumn comes, shadows start to grow. Every leaf reminds me of the love I know. Lonely winds are sighing, whispering your name. Yet the night keeps telling me it's not the same. See the though the world keeps turning, love has lost its way. Still my heart is yearning every night and day. When the autumn calls my heart, dreams of you will never part. the sky so calm and still. My heart remembers, my heart always will. The leaves would fall, but love remains. Every moment carved, it can't be changed. Though the years may fade, the song is true. Every autumn night I dream of you. On autumn hills I hear your name. Nothing ever feels the same. Through the shadows, soft and clear, love still whispers, I am near. The river hums a tender tune. Stars above still guard the moon. Though the night is cold, my heart is warm. In your memory I am reborn. On autumn hills I'll always stay, till the dawn brings back the day. Through the silence, soft and still, I'll be yours on autumn hill. Drifting in the autumn air, every star is shining there. Whispers float on silver skies. Love is glowing in your eyes. Gentle breezes hum a song, telling me where I belong. In the stillness, soft and true, every dream returns to you. Dreaming in the autumn night, everything just feels so right. Hold me close, don't let me go. Love will always gently play. gently, hear my call. Through the night we'll drift away till the dawn brings us again. Shadows dancing on the ground. Hearts are lost, but now they're found. In your arms, so warm, so near. Every fear will disappear. Moonlight serenade of fall. Love will find us after all. Through the silence, soft and small, hear my heart it tells it all. Let the world toss and turn. Let the midnight lanterns burn. I've got no fear, I've got no tears, as long as you're near. Let the wind change the moon. Let if the stars all fade away, if the songs forget to sing, I'll still have love as long as you're near. I'll get by year to year as long as you're autumn breeze softly call my name. Every star above shines just the same through the golden leaves, drifting far away. Love is in the air at the close of day. without a care. The moon is smiling from afar, so close your eyes, sweet lullaby, where I'll be here, just holding tight, till dreams come drifting through the night. No need to speak, no need to cry, just close your eyes, sweet lullaby. I've sung this song 100 ways, but none as soft as summer haze. And now I sing it just for you, to send you off with skies of blue. I understand till you're asleep, and guard the dreams you softly keep, till morning paints the waiting sky. Close your eyes, sweet lullaby. Sweet lullaby.